Hey Space Cowboy, I'm Angela and welcome back to Hobby Night. Today we're wrapping up painting the miniatures from Cowboy Bebop's Space Serenade from Japanime Games. All right, we are back and we have 3 final miniatures to paint up from Cowboy Bebop's Space Serenade from Japanime Games. We've got Ed, Ein, who are one model together. We've got Vicious, and we've got the main character man himself, Spike Spiegel.
Yes, you did well last week, but remember, Angela, none of the paints you used last week may be used on these 3, and none of the paints that you use on any of these individual models may be used on any of the others.
Oh, don't worry, Chaos Cultist and the audience. I have not forgotten, and I'm actually feeling quite confident. So without further ado, we've got our models already primed up in Greyseer. Let's get painting. I'm going to start with the 2 resident geniuses of the crew, Edward and Ein. And for Ed, she's got a lovely caramel skin tone, and I think Woodland Brown from the Master Series paint collection is going to be perfect as a base coat. And then I was looking at my reference, and I realized that Ein actually has very similar brown fur to Edward's flesh. So I'm actually going to use this exact same color on the doggo too, and go ahead and get 2 birds with 1 stone. After that, we're going to come back in with a wash to help differentiate them a little bit because they aren't identical, but they are very similar. So for Edward, we're going to use a light flesh wash and thin this down really heavily just so that it settles very loosely into the recesses, popping some details on her face and her hands. Then for the doggo, for Ein, our lovely little corgi, we're going to come back in with the exact same wash, but we're not going to thin it at all. We're going to use this directly out of the bottle and just put it over top everything, including the painted or the primed Greyseer on the dog as well, because I want that to tint slightly to give it a little bit of an off-white coloring, save myself on having to use another paint tone, and basically have Ein finished with the exception of a couple of details. All right, I'm feeling good about where our doggo is and also where Edward is looking, but we need to finish her clothes up. So for that, we're going to start with her shorts. And if you look at them in the show, they are basically just a black bike short, but they have this really deep purple undertone. So I'm going to actually use Shyish Purple, the contrast paint, as the color for her shorts, giving me that really almost black look, but having a very subtle violet undertone. I think it works perfectly, and I'm really happy with how this goes on. Now I want to move on to her fiery red hair, which I was originally going to just use Gryph Hound orange on it, but then I realized it's actually more red than it is orange in the show, and I just had a bad memory of it. So instead what I'm going to do is first base coat it in a lovely Pheonix red, which is a really fiery red, almost orange color tone, but definitely leans more red. I'm also going to use this color on a couple of details on her face, including the blush marks that she has, the interior of her mouth, because I think it just sort of gives it a nice fill in without it being too obvious or too red. And I just think it works with her flesh tone really well. And then we're also going to use this on Ein's collar because he has a little bit of a red collar and it always ends up being Edward's hair color. And I think that's just a little nice tie-in. After that, the only thing that's left to do is do a couple of details using some black and gold on Ein and Edward off camera, and then we have her shirt to take care of, which is simply going to get a single coating of Holy White. This goes on really cleanly. I absolutely love Holy White. I've talked about it a ton, but if you haven't already picked it up for yourself and you're looking for just a good white wash, I'd really recommend picking this one up. I finished with Edward, and honestly, there is a ton of things that I like about this model, but I think the thing that I'm most proud of myself on this one is deciding to use the same hair color that I put on her head in her mouth as well as on her cheeks, and also a little bit on Ein to just kind of unify everything. Like I could have used other color tones. I even thought about using Vulpus Pink, but I actually think the slightly more orange colors work with the overall color palette. And if you look at the art, often those little blush marks that she has on her face are actually the same color as her hair. So I just kind of went with it and I think it turned out great. We have her taken care of, which just means that we have the boys left. And Vicious and Spike are probably the 2 that I'm the most nervous about at this point. Vicious only because he's got actually quite a limited color palette.
and I want to make sure that all the various elements on his outfit actually stand out because he's got a very layered outfit, but the colors are just dark gray, black, and more dark gray. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to make that stand out, but I think I have some ideas and I've been saving contrast paint for this, so let's get to it.
All right, we're gonna start on the boys, and the first one we're gonna work on is Vicious because he is a very pale lad, and I needed to figure out what the heck I was gonna do for his flesh because I had already used one of my palest tones on Faye previously. But thankfully, I found a Pathfinder color in my collection called Kyonin Beige, and I think this works perfectly. It's got this slight yellow undertone, and if you look at Vicious, he actually has a little bit of a like jaundiced look in the show, so I think it's going to just be awesome. We're gonna get this down, making sure it's fully opaque so that we don't see any of that Greyseer undertone beneath, and then we're going to apply a very thin down light wash using Pallid Bone just to emphasize some of the details, specifically on his face, but also on the knuckles of his hands. It's that time of the video where I interrupt to tell you about my Patreon and to let you know that we just added a Discord server which all tiers get access to. So if you're wanting a way to chat with me, share with me your projects, or just tell me what board games you're playing, definitely make sure to check the link below and check out my Patreon. Next, we're gonna move on to Vicious's outfit. And if you actually look at it in the show, it's essentially a lot of black clothing with a little bit of gold trim, and that's it. And I don't wanna just throw Black Templar on the model with a little bit of gold and call it done. I think that's a little boring. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Baslicanum Gray on his suit and pants. That way, I'm going to have it be very dark still, but it's not going to be exactly matching the Black Templar that I'm going to be using on his outer jacket, as well as his katana and shoes and tie. Now the shirt I painted off camera using a little bit of brown because that's the only actual thing on him that has a little bit of color other than the gold, which is what we're moving on to next. For the gold, I'm going to be using Cursed Gold, and I just think this is a really nice bright gold. And I just want to pull out a couple of the details that you see on the character model to really make him stand out. Finally, the last thing to take care of on Vicious is that shock of white hair. And for this is what we've been saving Apothecary White for, and it goes down beautifully. I don't really need to do anything else to it. It gives it that slight blue undertone, making it look a little bit gray silver, and I think that is perfect for Vicious.
Vicious is complete, and honestly, he turned out way better than I was anticipating because for some reason, through this whole process, I've been a little bit afraid to just use pure contrast on these models, despite the fact that I did prime them in Greyseer, so it should work perfectly fine. But in my head, I was just like, they're not GW models, the contrast paint isn't going to work on them, but it has. And using the gray as well, like Baslicanum Gray, with the Black Templar, just like, it's worked perfectly. It gives him the exact look that I was wanting based off of his character art. So I'm very pleased with him, but we have one character left to do. So we're going to move on to Spike Spiegel.
Let's move on to Spike, and for this, we're going to start with his flesh tone just like we have done everybody else, and thank goodness that I picked up the Army Painter's skin tone set because I've had to go through a lot of different fleshes in this, and it's going to save me one more time. We're going to use amber skin for Spike here. I think it's going to work perfectly. It's a little bit of an olive color tone, and I just really like the way that this goes down. After we're done applying that, we're going to use a strong flesh wash from the Army Painter as well and thin this a little bit, but again, use it to pop the details on his face and hands. All right, we're down to Spike's outfit, and we're going to start with that beautiful light yellow undershirt, which I was a little nervous I wasn't actually going to have a color for, but thankfully I found this random selection of paints that I had gotten from a WizKids paint set, and I'm going to be using the pale yellow from that to get that shirt painted. Once we're done with that, I'm going to off camera paint his hair, his tie, boots, and his gun all in black, and then we're going to move on and see if I made the correct decision in not using Night Lord's blue on Spike and instead using it on Jet in the previous episode, because I have a plan for Spike and I hope it works. What I'm going to do first is apply heather blue to the entirety of his outfit that needs to be blue. This is what I think is going to work for that lighter color tone that you see on his lapel and cuffs and a little bit of the details on his suit. After that, we're gonna come back in with a Leviadon blue wash and apply this to create that navy blue color tone of the majority of his suit. And this works so perfectly. I was really worried it was going to end up being a little bit too dark blue in the same way that Shyish purple ends up looking almost black often, but I always forget that Leviadon blue actually has a very rich navy color tone once you actually get it out of the pot, and it just is perfect for Spike's outfit.
All right, I just wrapped up Spike's outfit, and frankly, I think the blue came out even better than I anticipated, so I'm very pleased with it. But we have a few more things to take care of, and that's mainly their bases. We're gonna do exactly what we did on Jet and FaZe, and use a bit of Astrogranite debris to make it so that they're all standing on the same moon. Once we're done with that, we just need to rim the bases, and now we can look at the final models.
And here they are. The entirety of the models from Cowboy Bebop, Space Serenade from Japanime Games, my Cowboy Bebop crew. I'm actually really, really happy with how they turned out. I have to compliment Japanime Games first and foremost on the really nice sculpts that actually feel true to the characters. Like, I was painting them and looking at them in detail as I was doing so and going, you know, they really did capture the likeness quite well to these models. And I think because I have this like bias towards games, especially ones that have intellectual properties that are not their own or original, I get really biased against those because I've seen so many sort of crappy models over the years. But modernly, they just continue to blow my mind, and I love seeing these characters come to life. And then they just took to painting really, really well. And I have to compliment the original design for those color palettes on those characters, because this challenge was all about not repeating my colors. And frankly, I never really felt like there was a point where I had to. The only two times where I know, right? You thought you got me, but I foiled this challenge. I conquered it. And really, it was genuinely like two instances where I felt like maybe there was gonna be a struggle. It was with Faye and Vicious's skin, because they both had a very pale color palette, and I just wasn't sure my paint collection actually had that many like pale flesh tones that didn't lean too undead looking, which I really wanted to avoid because that wouldn't have fit for either of them. And then the difference between painting Jet's outfit using the Night Lord's blue versus Spike's. Now, obviously what I did, I think worked perfectly, but prior to that, I was mildly concerned that I had made the wrong choice and that I wasn't going to find a way to get the proper navy color on Spike's outfit. But I nailed it with that Leviadon blue. I'm so happy with how these figures came out. And frankly, most of their faces look pretty good. Honestly, the one that looks the worst to me, or at least the most derp, is actually Spike's. I don't know what happened. Like, his eyes just didn't come out exactly how I wanted them to.
He has little orphan Annie eyes.
He does have little orphan Annie eyes, but you know what? I think it works because everybody else's faces look fantastic, especially Faye's from the first episode. I just still really love the way that her expression came out. So
I like Ed's.
Ed's is really good too, actually. I was kind of nervous about what her face was gonna be like because she had the largest, most like true anime looking eyes of everybody that were sculpted on there. So it just was a little bit nerve wracking to do that, but I think I nailed it. Like I said, I'm just very pleased. Before I head out, I do want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for allowing content like this to continue to happen. Without your guys' support, we wouldn't be doing this, so thank you very much. If you'd like to join them, you can find a link down in the video description below. I have been Angela, and I hope you have a wonderful hobby night.